Cool. So this is live. And I'm gonna minimize that to make things easier. Yes. Okay. Cool. I don't need that to be armed, but that's fine. So, I'm editing a episode of the Property Voice, and this is a run through just so you get an idea, a flavor, of how to edit things. So what I've done is from the elements folder, there's three things I typically drag into. So the template is what has been saved as a file, which is the Property Voice template, which you should be able to load up, and it typically will have these four things in here, and I'll have this broadcast channel kind of set up with different parameters in there. Make sure you have the other EQ settings in there. Typically for this one, it's advised to use a TPV-podcast, which is one I made specifically for Richard's voice. It is a bit tinny, but that's deliberate just to kind of reduce the amount of reflections that are occurring in his room. Sometimes there's the other ones that I've shared that might work. Mine is very bass heavy, so I don't really advise using that. So this is what it should look like. You should have these three options here. Now with this episode, it's just a one take episode. So there aren't separate sections that I have to work with. So typically what I would do is I have specific notes that I need to take into consideration with this one. And this is that the actual episode starts at about, I think, what did he say? About 15 minutes in. So I will drag this bad boy in straight to the beginning. Get rid of that. Go to around 15-minute mark. This is so tiny. So first thing is just to get size of everything. You probably know this, which is totally fine. So you set around 1553, which I think is around here.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Property Voice podcast.
Perfect. So that's his typical beginning. That's the way he typically would open his episodes. So I will delete all of that because all of that is not necessary. Ooh, don't do that. Not whilst I'm recording. So that's the episode, right? That's the beginning and the end of it. So I'll top and tail it with the audio. So the intro music is at the beginning, the outro music's naturally at the end. He did make a comment that this is probably going to be quite long. So I'm probably going to do a little audio kind of break at around that part. But we'll see. Again, this is the just edit version, so you don't have to listen to the whole thing. I typically just jump around just to make sure it sounds okay. So intro music, we'll go into the chimes or stings or whatever you want to call them. So that's that there, and we bring you along here. Now we can kind of have a bit of leeway with where you want this to start. I typically look for the top part of this intro, and you see there's a dip there. So somewhere after that dip, not that one, somewhere that's usually where I kind of tend to want it to start, because it feels like as the chord finishes and fades out, that feels like a natural kind of when you would breathe and start, right? So let's see if I made a good call here.
Property Voice, a voice to trust among the crowd. Now, let's get started with your host, Richard Brown.
Hello and welcome to another episode.
Yeah, so that's that. I'm happy with that personally. So the levels are hella off. So this minus, that's fine. Let's see.
A voice to trust among the crowd. Now, let's
pull you down a little bit more. I don't want you. So minus 1.5.
Voice, a voice to trust among the crowd. Now, let's get started with your.
That's kind of okay. So here, our good gentleman is not really pulling his things. So because this is just edit, I tend to use voice denoise as a plugin within Logic. I tend not to use it standalone, just because with this, like, you're not meant to spend a lot of time on it, right? It's just like just cleaning it up a little bit. It doesn't have to be, I don't know, professional radio broadcast, whatever level of things. It just needs to be clear, essentially. It just needs to be nice and clear. So compressor, usually I use the in stock one, which is Studio Vocal, which tends to be punchy enough. So
Your host, Richard Brown.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Property Voice podcast. My name is Richard Brown, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you join me again on the show today. This feels kind of weird because
so there's a lot of, I suppose it's me listening through the microphone, so this might be slightly skewed, but I can hear the room, right? So the DS is anywhere between 2,500. I usually do 2,800 and something. What else is there? I usually add de-reverb, but it's a bit dicey. It's a little bit dicey. I mean, it's good, but then it kind of kills off the top end a little bit too harshly. So let's just see what's good.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Property Voice podcast. My name is Richard Brown, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you join me again on the show today. This feels kind of weird because I'm actually talking to a panel with my sort of scripted intro. But today we're going to carry on the theme of property core skills. And today we're extending the conversation around finding deals. Last week we talked in outline. It was just me talking about some general principles about finding deals, finding property deals. And so I've invited a few of my mates to join me in the conversation today. So we've got Sean, Dominic, David and Carl, who are my willing volunteers to help with the conversation. And you'll hear, I'm sure, about their different angles and perspectives and experience as we're going to have, widen the conversation. So this is in reality.
So I completely forgot to say what I've been doing. So in here, with a de-reverb, I kind of play it by ear. There's no set fast rules. It's quite likely that if I do a couple more plays through this, that I will not like it, and I might get rid of it completely, just because as it's a panel, there's different vocal styles that are coming through Zoom, which means that this might completely obliterate some of the other voices. And as it's a one-channel mono delivery, there's not much you can do, which is why this is just edit, because if this was something that you had to work on and make it sound amazing with just one mono track, no, right? So I also chucked in a limiter. This is just me just being weird. It's probably not necessary. If you have a different way of just kind of getting the sound to be nice and punchy, by all means, go for it. I do tend to use sometimes, not with this, another little plugin that I don't think it costs that much. It's called Lux, and it looks very, very funny because it's a pipette, where it's basically a little cute compressor by Cleveground, and I'll sometimes use that if I find the top end's kind of being muddied too much and I want it to be punchier, but that will likely not be necessary right now. So let me get rid of that. All right. So
how people are working either to find deals for themselves and or to help find deals for other people. So welcome, all of you. Thanks for joining me today, first of all.
Hi, Richard.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Richard. Hi.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me. So what I think we'll do, we're going to have more of a conversation. So I kind of set you up and said what we talked about last time when you were talking coming from. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, Sean, you're off mic already. So do you want to lead us on?
Yeah, no problem. My name's Sean Thomas. I'm investing myself with a. So that's what we're doing.
Dominic, you were there waiting. I'll cue you in.
Yeah, I don't mind going next. Hi, I'm Dominic. I've been investing in property.
I'm just David. I can see you're ready. If you'd like to join.
Yeah, hi there. I'm David.
Interesting. And we'll maybe come back to your angle from deal.
All right, so typically what I would do with something like this is you can kind of see the different quality of people talking and the levels. So Richard's tends to be quite low. And when people start, they kind of, they're a bit excited and they've got more air in their lungs, and then they kind of settle into a little bubble of their talking, and then Richard will jump in. So with the just edit, so this is just quick editing, I'll typically just look for things that look a bit weird. So if there's a long pause here, maybe one of the guys has a really poor Zoom connection, and I'll dip in there to see what's going on. And if it's really, really bad, then I'll try and fix it just a little bit, right?
So much success. So whoever wants to.
Yeah, happy to start on that one, Richard. So for me, I've more recent like with the vendors, trying to find out a bit more about that property.
So more off market at the end there, yeah.
Yeah.
So just because I'm impatient, sometimes I will just kind of cut out long protracted pauses, because it just for the flow, if there's too much dead space, it kind of feels a bit weird. So just
so much success. So whoever wants to volunteer to take that one, I'll be happy.
Yeah, happy to start on that one, Richard. So for me,
so that kind of just feels a little bit better. It just flows a little bit quicker. So.
That property.
So more off market at the end there, yeah.
Blah blah blah.
So that immediately rules out certain types of properties.
Well, it's interesting. So I mean, you started. It can be quite an extended and involved process, can't it?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So those of you can't see, because I'm looking at the screen, but you might be listening to the podcast. I mean, Sean probably had a full head of hair when he started this 2 years ago. He's maybe pulled it all out. I think I listened in, or was aware of a few of the deals that you were, anything like that. Was that your style, or did you have a different approach?
I didn't. I don't know about Sean, but
No.
we need to be careful with a deal to work for.
Interesting. I'll come back to value engineering, definitely, because
That do work.
Territory, and they literally walk the streets probably, but that's not necessarily how you go about things. So why don't you just sort of share a little bit about that? Territory, and they literally walk the streets. Share a little bit about that.
Yes. So we
Meeting someone in person, like having a face-to-face conversation about something versus exchanging a few emails or having a phone conversation. There's one thing I like about that aspect of meeting on site.
Yeah, and so that just
All right, so he said that he would like a bit of a break, right, between two sections. So this is kind of the halfway mark, and this is where I'm gonna add the link. So if there's ever a request with this specific podcast, because this is podcast specific, for there to be breaks in the middle, usually the music link is what would be used. So it's just a little in England we call it a rugby ball, an egg. There you go. There's a universal definition. It's an egg. It's a fuzzy egg. So put the fuzzy egg in there, and just kind of tail it off. So I like there to be like a kind of slow transition in, and then a bit of a hard transition out, or a fast transition out. So get this bad boy up.
Exchanging a few emails or having a phone conversation. There's one thing I like about that aspect of meeting on site.
Yeah, and so that just to drill into that a little bit more, I mean, the relationship. Yeah, and so that just to drill into that a little bit more, I mean, the relationship is nice, but what does it give you? What does it?
So that's that. We'll just
What's
keep
the end game of developing that relationship?
Pretty much what David and
Cool. So I'm just going to assume this is going to be more of the same. There's going to be more protracted things in there. So I'm not going to do this like for the whole thing, because otherwise you're going to be watching me doing this for 30 minutes. But I'm going to look at the end, because the end with the outro, let's shove the old outro in here. Whoop. Cool. So the outro has words on it. So you see how it's kind of small and then it gets pretty big. So this gives me wiggle room to kind of figure out where that got really big for a second. That's quite fun. To figure out where around here I want this to start, because there's this kind of music and then there's kind of the call to action at the end. So I'm going to mute this for a second, see what's going on here.
Of course. But, thanks again for listening this week. And until next time on the Property Voice podcast, it's ciao, ciao.
So that's his end. I don't really need to listen to the rest of it. So that's the way he kind of finishes. He says, it's ciao, ciao. So I kind of want there to be a little bit of breathing room between the last bit of words and the new set of words. So that's why I kind of leave that as a space. And go into automating volume again. So little anchor, you come in there. You're going to come in there and do that in a second. So this goes down here. And then there's another one that starts. So I go from kind of infinities here, and it's a curve. It's a very, very brutal curve, I think. Something kind of like that. So go in.
I'm happy to introduce you if you'd like to meet them, as long as they're willing to share their contact details, of course. But, thanks again for listening this week. And until next time on the Property Voice podcast, it's ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening today. Now head over to thepropertyvoice.net for more inspirational content and get updates through our mailing list. Join us next time on the Property Voice podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to rate us on iTunes.
So maybe it's just me. Again, the ending, I just like to end it sooner than it needs to be ended, so you don't get any weird kind of cutoffs from anything. So here I've made a weird kind of little curve. I might actually move the whole thing forwards.
But, thanks again for listening this week. And until next time on the Property Voice podcast, it's ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening today. Now head over to thepropertyvoice.net. Inspirational content.
Of course. But, thanks again for listening this week. And until next time on the Property Voice podcast, it's ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening today. Now head over to thepropertyvoice.net for more inspirational content and
for listening this week. And until next time on the Property Voice podcast, it's ciao, ciao.
Thank you for
Cool. And that's basically it, really. So for the sake of making bouncing really easy and not having to select things and make things really complicated, go here, check the automation again, make sure it's not cutting too soon, a little bit of space, good. So that's basically it. That's basically the whole thing.
If you want, I saw you ready, Sean. You can jump in and say something. No, you'll pass. Okay, so I'm just going to...
All right, so I just noticed that on my little thing here, so I might try and fix this.
Sure, you can jump in and say something. No, you'll pass. Okay, so I'm just...
Okay, so this is me just being finicky. It's a good client, it's a friend of mine, so yeah, I just tend to do a little bit more than necessary.
You can jump in and say something. Perfect. No, you'll pass.
Gotta love a good stitch of words together. So yeah, so basically that's the whole thing. That's if you're doing a just edit, this is kind of the level of involvement you want to go into. And that's kind of, it would be 30 minutes, but I'm just going to say, like, because it's been 20 minutes already and I want to show you the exporting. This is why it shouldn't take too long to do these, because you don't need to get too precious over it. So hit save, and now we're going to go into bounce. So for this project, and for most podcasts really, everything's exported as an MP3. The start and end is your typical thing. Make sure the end is actually the end there, not the end on some random bit of audio. The bit rate in stereo is 128. So it's 128 because people can't really tell that there's that much of a difference, and a lot of directories and platforms tend to kind of stream at a lower level anyway. And with the file size, it's used just to kind of respect the accounts. So if people don't use or don't pay for a lot of space on Blueberry or Libsyn or whatever, then this is kind of the viable level that I'm personally happy with so far as the file size they get. So if this is a 40-minute podcast, it's more or less going to be like 35 megabytes. So if they have 4 of those a month and they're only got 180 megabytes a month or whatever, then we're kind of playing into that safe space of their allowance. So mono's 80, stereo's 128. I export a stereo, joint stereo, just because of the audio. So best encoding, do not have VBR enabled. Filter frequencies below 10 hertz. Yes, why not? It gets kind of messed up in the podcast anyway. And ID3 tags. So ID3 tags are super important. So in here you go in here. Because of the template, you're going to find, I forgot to change these and now it's forevermore, that in some of the other templates, you're still going to find this information in the ID3 tags. So even if you don't tag anything, still go into the ID3 tags and check this one, right? So this is a different episode. So you'll get this as a note, a PDF. I'm tired. Get this as a PDF with information on what to call things and stuff. So this is, where is it? Okay, property core skills. That's what I'm looking for. So property core skills, panel discussion, and we can delete all of that. So you got that property core skills, panel discussion. The property voice, scroll down, URL, www.thepropertyvoice.net. Now, the question here can be, is this relevant? It will be. So it's better to get into habits now, because the way RSS feeds and everything work, and also because this is native to Apple, you never know if Apple just kind of decides to read ID3 settings from one of its native software into Apple Podcasts, especially with what they're doing currently. So that's just good practice. So the URL is always the URL of the podcast client, which again will be in the PDF. Copyright is always theirs, and produce notice is me, Audiofi. So 2021 Audiofi Limited, obviously, as years go by, you kind of change that. So that's all you need to do in there. Don't need to worry about the beats per minute or whatever. Genre, podcast. Maybe they make podcasting a genre. Who knows? So hit OK. And hit OK again. And wherever you have your files, however you decide to set this up, this is I don't care about this, obviously, because this is your local space. So for this client, I have their episodes here, and I just like having a bounce space where all the final episodes are, separate to where the project is. But that's just me. If you do it some way differently, as long as you can stay on top of it, I do not mind. So the name is the same as what was in the ID3 tag, so it's property core skills, panel discussion. I think, let's see, let's go into Dropbox. No, not you. Messenger, blah 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 blah. Okay, cool. There's nothing in there. Hello, cat. Cool. So that's that. And I'm going to hit bounce. So that's basically it. That's all you have to do. Once you've bounced the final version of the podcast, go into the shared Dropbox that I've created for both of us to be able to send and receive files. In the now she's forgotten the name of the file that she's created. Hilarious. I think it's in the final versions or something. Let me find this, or is it what is that? That's not right. So in the folder called outgoing final work, shove the final bounced MP3 into that. Drop me a message in Slack telling me it's done. I'll go have a look. If it's good, then it gets signed off. If it's not, if I have a little bit of a query, then naturally in Slack I'll send you a message going, hey, this sounds weird, or this is the wrong episode, or this was the wrong file. That'll likely be back onto me, which is fine. We'll change that and fix it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope that has explained everything. I've tried to be quick. I was hoping this was going to take 15 minutes, but I got a little bit carried away because I wanted to finish this at the same time as finishing this so I can send it off to the client. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy editing. If there's any issues or anything, I'm always around at some point, unless I'm sleeping. I'm in the UK, so bear that in mind. But yeah, other than that, cool.